These guys survived the David Kahn era of Timberwolves basketball and live to tell about it. It's Flagrant Howls.
Like second or third unit bigs, they kind of run around, roll, rebound, and stuff like that. But when you have a guy this talented offensively, he's got to be the centerpiece of what you're doing. And we love him because he's a great system fit, and he creates a lot of offense for himself and others, just, with his decision making. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to have around, and so it's fun to watch these guys play when they get these opportunities.
It was electric last night at Target Center. Electric at Target Center for that preseason game, boys.
How did we end up with a non-NBA opponent? Is that team just sort of like barnstorming around the NBA, or what's the?
Yeah, this was their third. So it's an Israeli professional team, and they had so Dwayne Bacon was on that team. Dwayne Bacon was a starter for the Orlando Magic for like 50 games 2 years ago. I think he averaged like 10, 11 points a game. So they had Dwayne Bacon and then two or three other guys that played, like one guy that played at Utah, not the Jazz, but like the university a few years ago. Yep. And I think there was 4 NBA or guys who had been at least on an NBA roster before. And the Wolves did not play any of their top 8 or 9 players. Luka Garza went off last night. Luka Garza, by the way, he's down to like 6% body fat. He's nimble. He's chiseled. He dominated that game. Leonard Miller, the guy that was projected to maybe be a lottery pick, and he winds up going into the second round. The Wolves snag him with was it the 33rd pick or whatever it was, and he goes for 22 and 15. Josh Minott was everywhere. I went with a buddy, and we wound up, so we had tickets like at the top of the lower bowl, kind of in that middle section at half court, and there was literally like 120 people in the arena last night. So we wound up sitting like right above the Lexus Club set. We just kind of every like 5 minutes just kind of move down, see if anyone yells at us. We're like on the court. Let's go, Luka! We got this.
Yeah, they're not going to yell at you. That's awesome. So what? So Garza, what does he look like compared to the end of last season? Then
I would say it's so hard to tell because like if you're dominating. And there were some good reviews on him and some of the offseason stuff too. But if you're dominating, like a second level international team, it's hard until you put him in an actual NBA game. And I think part of the issue, he's a really interesting player, and he has worked his ass off to go from, is he going to go play in Europe for 5 or 10 years and then be a coach at some point? Like the fact that he's still pounding on the door of the NBA is a credit to the work he's put in. He can shoot. Obviously, he's expanded his range. But when your team has Karl-Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid just signed a huge contract. You're trying to find minutes for Kyle Anderson at the 4, at the 3. Like, I don't know unless somebody gets hurt. Also, Leonard Miller, man. Like, I think if it was between Luka Garza and Leonard Miller, we need another big to play 10 or 15 minutes. I think Leonard Miller would maybe even be above Luka. So I don't know what his future is, but it's fun to watch him dominate inferior teams and get in garbage time and just be like a tornado of activity, which he was last night. Some people were kind of complaining, and I get it. And by the way, Flagrant Howls starting next week, twice a week with Kyle. And then we're going to be mixing in another episode or 2 with Judd and Declan. So we're going to be pumping several episodes a week of Flagrant Howls now that the Wolves are starting up here. But some people, and I think I agree with this, that was the only preseason game at home. And the Wolves announced like a day beforehand, hey, we're not going to play anybody. Anthony Edwards, Karl-Anthony Towns, like none of these guys are going to play. Jaden McDaniels with his calf injury. So I do feel bad for if it was like your one time coming in from outstate Minnesota or Iowa or something, and you want to watch a Wolves preseason game and see Anthony Edwards. They did interview him for 30 seconds on the Jumbotron, so at least you got to see him.
Well, if you made the mistake of actually saying, you know what, we want to go to one Wolves game, we're coming in from the Dakotas, let's make it a preseason tilt, I don't feel a lot of empathy at that point. But you know what? From what I've seen, it does look like around the league that in ordinary regular preseason games, starters are starting to play more. So like this whole thing now of actually holding teams accountable and players accountable is going to be a very interesting thing. I don't think the Wolves have had a widespread problem with this, but I think you're going to see a lot more star players consistently against the Wolves at home than you might have seen in the past, 3-4 years.
Well, yeah,
they put in the rule, right? They put in the load management rule too, which fines. Is it a fine?
It's 65 games minimum if you want to qualify for like postseason accolades, which also trigger more money.
Bonuses, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, and you might be right about a fine. I don't know how you determine some of that, or like what if a guy has kind of a sore back or something,
right.
But he would totally play if it was a key game. Right. I don't know how they determine some of that, but I think, yeah, I know you don't have any empathy, but it is kind of like you can't run those guys out for 5 minutes in your only preseason game. But I digress here. I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on this whole new Karl-Anthony Towns demeanor that's become a conversation over the past 2 or 3 weeks. So Chris Hine did a write-up like 6 or 7 days ago, and I'm going to read you an excerpt from this, but just a couple personal observations, one from last night, because they interviewed Kat during one of the timeout breaks, but I was at Media Day 2 weeks ago now, I think, or 10 days or 2 weeks ago. It was like 3-4 hours. The Tim Connolly, Coach Chris Finch, and then every player on the roster had like a 15-minute slot where they were up there. It's first day of school. We're at the podium. Here we go. All the media is assembled. It's largely a very positive and sort of rejuvenated feeling on Media Day. You're not still dwelling on like what happened in game 1 or whatever of the playoff series. And so, as I mentioned to you guys a couple weeks ago, everybody who went up there was like, this is great. Here we go. First day of school. This is a blast. Get to see all my basketball buddies again. The energy level was great. Everybody was smiling. Everybody was ready to rock. Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, Gobert. The only guy that brought weird energy the entire day was Karl-Anthony Towns. He was very sullen. He was very just sort of, I don't know if somber is the word, but just the only time he perked up was when somebody asked him a question about playing for the Dominican Republic in the World Cup, and he enjoyed answering that question. But he was going out of his way to keep answers as short as possible and to keep his demeanor as like flat and or even like annoyed as possible. Yeah. All right, maybe he's having a weird day, right? Yeah. Then yesterday, so they interview Anthony Edwards during one of the timeout breaks, and hey, great to see all the fans. This is great. Rudy Gobert with his tight little French shirt on, talking about, my off season, it's great. Yeah, is this, that, the other. And then Cat it's literally like the in-house guy, right? He's Cat, hey man, like there's no fastballs being thrown here. It's like, how's your summer been? And he's just like, I don't know, just kind of his energy just kind of dragged, and he was kind of like annoyed at having to do this. It just seemed like. So here's Chris Hine from the Star Tribune. Buttoned up Karl-Anthony Towns adopting a different tone this preseason. At Timberwolves Media Day, Towns did not project the kind of bouncy and engaging personality with which he has dealt with media over the years, mostly. Instead, Towns was serious, sullen, and short with his answers with reporters instead of being loquacious and affable. Then, last Tuesday, Towns was no different than he was at Media Day, as he spoke for only about 3 minutes in another abrupt media session. What is the purpose behind this new demeanor? Quote, "There's not much to say," Towns said. Get the job done. Do you like this, or what do you think about this?
This is so intriguing. It's so, first of all, it's so Cat, but it's so intriguing. So what I've been told was that if you guys recall, he went on Pat Bev's podcast and somebody else's, and by the way, friends of his. So like, this was not, he did not get rope-a-doped in by Shams, like, hey, come on my podcast, and then get set up for but in the course of being on with Pat Bev, what was his quote about the Nuggets? He
essentially insinuated or said directly that it was a bigger accomplishment or a more impressive accomplishment what the Wolves did.
Yeah.
Because they had to gel it together in less time than what the Nuggets did because they've been a nucleus for several years. Yeah. Right.
So that's ridiculous. And it was pointed out time and time again. And then from what I've heard, Cat became very upset that he got a ton of guff. And again, he went on his buddy's podcast. Like, this was not a setup. This was not, you can't call what Pat Bev does a hit piece. Even if you think he screwed you, you're not going to come out and say, yeah, Patrick Beverley screwed me. So I think what he's done now is, because he took so much flack, he's trying to pull back. But it's typical Karl, because Karl, and this is the thing, he is the big pout. Like, this is how he acts. He will go into, I mean, he does this on the court. He pouts. He'll start to pout. And so I think, my question is, how long is this going to last? Like, is this something that he can do for an entire season, for the rest of his career? But here's the productive thing, in my opinion. With where this franchise is trending with Ant, I think this is just fine if he doesn't say much. Because this is, again, that's confirming it's more Ant's team. And let's be honest, like, let's go through the greatest hits of Karl-Anthony Towns' Wolves career from a media perspective of what he said, okay? Like, how often has Karl said something in the last 3 years where you've been like, oh, that's what I want to hear. That's fantastic. You know, I mean, I don't know if this is part of his big pout, but we've talked about this a ton. That post-game Hawks interview when he finally came back and they beat the Atlanta Hawks at home, and he's acting like they just won a game 7 of the playoffs. You know, it's like a movie. Was one of the most tone deaf for the moment. Like, it would have been great to say, I'm back. It's fantastic to be back. But he's celebrating it as if it was this huge victory because he was there. So, long story short, I think this is actually a productive thing, as long as the pout doesn't affect the play, which is what always concerns me with Karl.
Yeah, I actually think this is a great thing to just, I'm going to forget about all the weird energy stuff. I don't love some of that. You know, you don't have to overcome. You said some weird stuff that you got clowned for. I think rightfully so. You know, just stuff that, like, what are you talking about? You know, I don't know that you have to overcompensate fully the other way and now just be completely shut off as if it's everyone else's fault that you said something, right? That's what it feels like to me. It's like, well, everything I say is being misinterpreted, so I'm just going to say nothing. It's like, well, or you could, I don't know. I don't know that that's the right way to look at it. But the last thing he said in this quote from the Star Tribune was, there's not much to say, get the job done. I love that, because he's right. What is it? Is this his 8th, 9th year? I mean, he's been with the Timberwolves for close to a decade, right? Mm-hmm. And they have not advanced out of the first round of the playoffs. I'm not saying it's his fault. I know he's been bad in about half the playoff games. It is what it is. But here you are, through all of this turmoil and all of the losing and then the resurgence here and then the injury last season, right? And you're standing at the doorstep of another season. And I agree with him. There isn't much left to say for him or the Timberwolves. Go get the job done. And this is a great scenario for him, because for the first time in his career, he's not being looked at as the sole savior of this franchise. I think for a while it was him and Wiggins, but then it was pretty evident after like a year of watching Karl-Anthony Towns. Oh, Towns is the better player. He's the unicorn here. So literally from like the second half of his rookie season all the way through, Jimmy Butler came and kind of took that torch for a minute, but the pressure's been on him to do what KG did 25 years ago, bring this franchise to relevancy. And now going into this year, Cat is kind of an added bonus. You're getting this guy that's a former All-NBA player that shoots the lights out from three-point range. He's a unicorn player that can dribble from the top of the key, get to the rim, and do all these things. But nobody is looking at him as the guy to save everything. People are looking at Anthony Edwards now. Hey, who's going to score points in the fourth quarter? Who's going to take over a playoff game? That's Anthony Edwards' job. Who's going to be the face of the franchise, the charismatic leader of this whole thing? People are looking at Anthony Edwards for that. Who's going to protect the rim and rebound and clean everything up and do all the dirty work inside? People are looking over at Rudy Gobert saying that's that guy's job. Now, Cat has to do some of these things too. But the fact is, this is the first time in his career that people aren't staring at him being like, come on, man, save the franchise. Let's go. So I think he should walk a little lighter going into this season than maybe any other season in his career. And this could wind up being a great fit. He could just kind of come in, slide under the radar a little bit, and do the things that he's really good at.
I think my biggest issue with him is so he comes in the league at 19 years old. He turns 28 years old next month. He's already been in the league for such a long time, but I just have never been a fan of his body language, how he carries himself, how he talks about things. That's always been my biggest gripe. I've never had a doubt this guy can't play basketball or this guy doesn't have the ability to be one of the best basketball players on the planet. And I think most people probably align with the latter part of that as well. But there could be something here that when you turn 28 years old, and he's still only 27, going on 28 years old, that there is something that maybe clicked in his life outside the court that realized, you know what, maybe the way I have been acting, I have been handling things hasn't been appropriate. Maybe it's not the best way to handle it. So how can I change my mindset? Now, does that mean I come off more than like an abrasive jerk? If that works for him and it changes some of those things, I'm totally okay with that. I have no issue with the guy potentially going into his, now late 20s, realizing, you know what, how I maybe handled situations, I probably could have done some things differently. Not to completely put myself in his shoes, but maybe something clicked for him off the court that now just makes him a better person to handling adversity and handling situations like that. And if that has happened, then I think there is a completely unlocked level to Karl-Anthony Towns that we have never seen before.
My concern is this. I think that, like, if this had come after an off season of reflection, Dex, I love what you just said. The problem is, again, he's pouting. He's basically like, you guys all are saying I said these things, which, by the way, you did say. And so I just won't say much. My concern is he hasn't changed a bit. And so my concern is when this does clearly become Ant's team, like to Phil's point, everyone's looking to this guy. Everyone's looking to this guy. Hey, Cat, you're free. That's going to cause more emotional consternation and more pouting. This is why, like, I would say, if I'm Finch, I would sit Cat down and say, hey, you know what? Saying less is great. And you're also, I would say to Cat what Phil just explained, but I don't know that he can take that. See, that's my question. Well, I don't know. I don't know that this won't pivot when everyone is like, you know what, Carl? Don't say a word. We don't care. We're all going to talk to this guy. I think the pout will just change.
Listen, I've been harder on him than anyone the last 5 or 6 years, probably in Minnesota media, to the point where Anthony Edwards' friends came up to Kyle at Vegas Summer League and said, hey, man, like, we love the podcast and Anthony Edwards appreciates all the kind words. Can you guys please, like, take it easy on Carl? Who's that one Mickey guy? That guy that's always ripping on it's Mackie, but thank you. He's always ripping on Carl. But to your point about Finch, like, what is Finch saying to Carl? Well, he sort of pulled back the curtain on that a little bit in this same Star Tribune article that Chris Hine wrote a few days ago. One of the things that Chris Finch is telling Carl is, hey, focus on doing the things that get you going in a game. Last year, there was a lot of pressure on Cat. Hey, Rudy Gobert is here. We need you to kind of move over here and play a little bit of a different role. Make sure that you're getting him going offensively because we can get Rudy some touches. He shoots 70% field goals. Like, if you can get him touches, it was all about, like, making Rudy comfortable. But make sure we're getting the ball to Anthony Edwards over here. And then D'Lo needed his to get going, right? And now D'Lo's gone. And Rudy's been here for a year. Mike Conley is more of a pass-first, initiate point guard. So it sounds like Finch is telling Cat, dude, get yourself going. Shoot threes. Be ready to shoot. Dribble drive. Do your thing from the top of the key and just go be a monster. And don't worry about being the one that sets the table for everybody else. That's the opposite of what Nikola Jokic is being told going into games, right? I mean, Jokic is being told, and he knows just internally, I can go get 40 points if I want to, but our team works best if I'm facilitating, if I'm setting the table, but then I'm also cooking over here. I think they finally told Towns, that's just not, like, maybe someday, but you're not really able to do all of those things. So just go get yourself going, focus on you, and then let the other things sort of happen around you. That's how I interpreted what Finch was telling Karl-Anthony Towns per the Star Tribune.
And I hope in his mind that's possible. Carl strikes me, I think one is, and this is going to come as no surprise, Carl's biggest enemy is Carl. Like, it's not the opponents, it's Carl. And the second thing is, and perhaps as he nears 30, he can pivot. But if I were to sit down with him as a licensed sports therapist in this town, I would say, Carl, you need to turn off all of the noise around you. You need to focus on you. Don't worry about your teammates. Don't worry about, like, because some guys can. Some guys are captains. Some guys are captains, and some aren't. And that's also largely how you are constructed as a person. Some people have the ability to multitask, to worry about others, to star in their role, and some people need to focus on them. But it feels to me like in his 20s, and this is a lot of folks, not just Cat. It feels to me like in his 20s, what we have seen is a guy who really struggles to turn off the outside noise. There's always some type of drama. And we all know, we all have friends like this. Like we all know people like this. So this is not like, oh, it's just Karl. But if you think about what this team has been through with, or what he has gone through, and some of it is tragic and some of it is things he has caused around him, but there always seems to be a lot of outside noise. And I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of these guys have hardships. And if you look at, Karl's mom dying was awful, but like if you look at Ant and what he has been through as a human, he's been through a lot too. And so I guess my question is, can Karl turn off the noise? And then Phil, this dovetails into what you're saying about Finch perfectly. Can he then concentrate on what Finch said, which is get yourself going and only worry about that? And that's where I think if he can, you're going to get to a key part of his career. I just don't know if it's possible or not.
You know what we need? You know what really turned LeBron James? LeBron James was an excellent player. I think he won. I'm pretty sure he won at least 1 or 2 MVPs before he won a championship. But what got him to that next level, and I am not comparing Karl directly to LeBron James, by the way. Remember when LeBron, going into the playoffs, like the second year with the Heat, decided, I'm going zero dark LeBron. No social media. No, nothing. Like, it's just me and basketball for the 2 months of the playoffs. And then I'll start tweeting again in August or whatever, July or August. And it was literally like called Zero Dark LeBron, right? We need like Zero Dark Cat. And if he needs to be a little bit more sullen here, however he needs to get there to live up to what he told the Star Tribune, there's not much to say, get the job done. Karl says a lot of things throughout his career that don't actually wind up coming to fruition or aren't actually like the case. He kind of tries to be the leadership voice, but it tends to ring hollow over the years. There's not much to say, get the job done is about the most profound thing I've heard him say in 9 years, if he can live up to it. But no one's saying that you have to be like sullen the whole season and that basketball can't be fun. There's got to be some middle ground there, but we'll see. This is as the guy who's been the hardest on Karl for years and years, this is the most optimistic I've been about him and his situation with the team and his overall, like, the state of his game, probably since he joined the Timberwolves back in, 2015.
He's never been in a better potential situation. Like, if he can embrace it, you're right. Like, the whole thing of you are the team, you are the pseudo captain, all of that is gone. So yes, if he can embrace what he's being surrounded by and worry about himself only and his game, I sort of like that, because it's not in this case, it's not selfish. In this case, it's actually probably what he needs to do to be his best, which is don't worry about everybody else will take care of themselves, right? Like Ant will take care of himself and a bunch of the team probably. Gobert will take care of himself. So Cat doesn't need to be the voice. And Cat clamming up is not going to affect anyone adversely. Like, it's not like, oh my God, he was the guy and now he won't talk.
No.
So it could work out perfectly. But again, I want to make sure this isn't just pouting on his part to try to get attention because you hurt my feelings by perfectly articulating what I said, but now I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah. So, in addition to Cat just sort of being healthy and maybe having just a better situation now than he's had, and Anthony Edwards' continued evolution, you asked me via email yesterday, what is like the biggest thing that you're on the lookout for, the difference between last season? And I have an answer for you, but let's shut out our friends. No relation, Finch Home Solutions. Maybe Cody Finch is a distant relative of Chris Finch. I don't know. They're both awesome at their jobs. They perform their jobs at a very high level.
I still think Judd and Chris are the same person. I still think that they are the exact same guy.
Finchy and I are like 4 days apart. I think he was born like 4 days before or after me. But look at that van right there. Look at that beautiful van. What sound does that van make, boys? Thank you very much. And that means, and I'm sure their horn is not that abrupt, but that means Finch Home Solutions is pulling up in front of your home or business to take care of any electrical issues that you might have. And yes, Finch is your one call, your one website to visit if you need any work done electronically in your home. That could include, I don't know, replacing an outlet, something very small. That could include rewiring your whole house. That could include, as we near Declan's favorite time of year, that would be hot tub season.
Hot tubs, man.
All of the installation. You think about a hot
tub.
tub, boys? The end result, it's all because of the electronics installed for that hot tub. Finch Home Solutions does it all. Give them a call, 612-357-2604, 612-357-2604, or go to their new redesigned and improved website, finchhomesolutions.com. Finchhomesolutions.com. There's a form right there that you can fill out. Finch will then show up at your house fast, courteous, professional. Cody Finch and his team are the best in town.
Also, hey, over at scorenorth.com/shop, we have a couple things for you. On the merchandise section, we have Flagrant Howls shirts, hoodies, T-shirts. So get your Flagrant Howls. And I believe Ross sent this over. The promo code FLAGRANT is good for 15% off at scorenorth.com/shop, the merchandise wing. The collectibles section of scorenorth.com/shop, courtesy of our friends at Universal Sports Auctions, has all kinds of great signed memorabilia, things for you to deck out your man cave, your basement, gifts for family members, your kids, your dad, brothers, sisters, whatever it is. So you could, right now on the screen, if you're a hockey fan, we got a Matt Boldy jersey signed right there with the old school North Stars colors. All kinds of amazing things at scorenorth.com/shop collectibles. And the code for that checkout is SKOR, SKOR, for 10% off everything store-wide. So, okay, obviously, like the biggest things from last year to this year to get better if you're the Timberwolves, go from 42 wins to, I think the over-under is 48.5, according to most sports books. Mm-hmm. Cat can't miss 52 games with the calf, okay? Anthony Edwards' continued evolution is going to play a huge role. I think just integrating Rudy and getting more comfortable, that stuff, that's the big stuff. But a sneaky big thing is how many bad minutes the Wolves could swap out for good minutes. So last year, I was going through the roster yesterday. Jordan McLaughlin was like before the calf injury, was a rock solid sort of backup point guard. He can't really shoot, so that's always going to be an issue. But he was a good straw to stir the drink, and the lineup combinations and the plus minuses always looked good when he was in lineup. After the calf injury, Jordan McLaughlin was maybe their worst player because he couldn't shoot and he was out of sync. Something was off. They've kind of minimized his role. Now he's no longer the backup point guard. He's going to be, they've got 2 or 3 other ball handlers that are going to be above him in the pecking order. So you're taking some of those minutes out. Jalen Noel played 20 minutes a night for 65 games last year. He shot 28% from 3-point range and played 0 defense. You're taking those minutes, you're shoving them out the door.
I know.
Like not what happened to him. I know he's gone, but what happened to him as far as his offense?
Man. That's about as wrong as
you were both high on him.
Dude, yeah. Kyle too, man. Like, not to throw him under the bus, but like he's so skilled and he has a smooth shot and he made a bunch of threes the year before. And then he gets out there and he has no self-awareness of it's not Jalen Noel time here. We need to slow down a little bit and just kind of work within the confines. So that's 20 minutes a night gone. Mm-hmm. Austin Rivers, I think, was a really good veteran leader. They needed his presence last year, but, at 20 minutes a night, I think it's fair to say at this stage in his career, he's probably a better podcaster than basketball player at 20 minutes a night.
That's fair.
To be disrespectful. But so those minutes are gone. Taurean Prince is another one. So Taurean Prince played 22 minutes a night for the Wolves last year. But the advanced metrics hated his game. He was actually 13th on the team in player efficiency rating, and he had one of the lowest win shares per 48 minutes. Now, he had that game against the Knicks where he went off and single-handedly won it, and he gave you spurts of being an excellent player. Right. But he was such a high-variance player where at his worst, he was getting run off the court. Certain lineup combinations didn't work with him. So on a great night, you want Taurean Prince. Overall, not the most efficient, effective player, at least for the Wolves last year. So you're taking all of those sort of bad minutes or non-efficient minutes, and you're getting more Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's just a Tasmanian devil of energy and understanding his role. He's not going to go out there and Jalen Noel's like, all right, I got 15 minutes tonight. I'm taking 13 shots.
Right.
That's not going to be Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Shake Milton, rock solid combo guard, role player with those good Sixers teams the last 4 or 5 years. Troy Brown Jr., not much for defense, but I mean, that guy last night against, it was like a second-rate Israel pro team, but he knocked down like 4 threes in the second half. He can shoot threes off the bench, which is going to be key. And then I think another underrated one is you're swapping out 32 minutes a game of D'Angelo Russell, who you guys know my opinion on him, just like a clueless, just stat padding, empty calories player, for a substantive adult who organizes the offense in Mike Conley. I just think I'm not saying all these guys are going to be perfect, flawless players, but getting rid of a lot of that and subbing in a lot of this should be really helpful off the bench, filling out like 6, 7, 8, 9, the 10th roster spot.
All right, let's go through this a little bit. Why is Jordan McLaughlin going to make the team if you've got that much depth in front of him now?
Well, I mean, because there's 14, 15 roster spots. So he's going to be, that's like asking like, why is the fifth safety not going to make the Vikings? Because you've got,
sometimes I cut that guy.
Okay. But
in my world, sometimes I cut him, but I'm just, so like, is he going to play at all? Do you expect, or not really?
I think it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think he gets minutes early. I would be, now if they get the pre-calf injury, McLaughlin, you want that guy on your team because he can come in and like, especially if there's an injury,
right? You
need guy like you'd probably rather have him as a backup ball handler than like a fifth big that you're probably never going to play, So, yeah, he's not going to be like a meaningful player on this team unless 4 guys get hurt. So I know I can tell you're like worried that he's on the roster by that question. I wouldn't be worried that he's
no,
on the roster.
It's not really worried. It's more curious. It's curious. I'm curious what the bottom of the roster is going to be. Like what positions they're going to keep and players, but positions too.
Yeah, they run deep, man. Like the guys so Nickeil Alexander-Walker, your bench is going to be Naz Reid, Nickeil, Shake Milton, Troy Brown Jr., Kyle Anderson. Like those are, so your starters are obviously going to be Kat Gobert, Jade McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley. So that's 5. Mm-hmm. And then your next 5 in no order are going to be Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kyle Anderson, Shake Milton, Troy Brown Jr. I feel like I'm forgetting 1 or 2 key guys. But then there's like Leonard Miller is going to get some playing time at some point. Josh Minott, probably not so much. But I mean, it like runs 10 deep of competent professional NBA players before you would even get to Jordan McLaughlin. Maybe even 11 deep.
So their depth is definitely improved a lot.
Oh, God. Yes. On paper.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Well, yeah. And guys get hurt too. Yeah. So you do expect Garza to make the team then?
I think I'd have to look at the crunch here, but does he have a 2-way contract? He spends a lot of time in Iowa is what's going to happen.
I think he's still on a 2-way. Yes.
And then Matt Ryan's another one who is kind of borderline to make the final roster. But yeah, those guys, like, there's nowhere for Luka Garza to play right now.
Right.
Unless somebody gets hurt.
Yeah, he's on a 2-way. Non-guaranteed, but 2-way contract.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there you go. So yeah, I mean, they've got depth, man. They've got a good team. But the only thing, Kyle brought this up yesterday on Flagrant, is they don't have a ton of starting lineup flexibility because it's like if it's determined after 2 months, you know what, Kat and Gobert just don't really mesh well together. You can't like bring one of those guys off the bench because they're both super max players. Like both those guys would get weird about coming off the bench. So you can't do what other teams might do is like, oh, this lineup's not working. What if we brought this good player off the bench? They're both going to start. So they have to figure out how to at least break even together and then let the other lineup combinations, maybe be additive.
So what Doogie's been saying for about a year now is correct then. So this is the year for Kat. Like if it doesn't work, you're going to have to do something. Doogs' point was, because we talked about actually Kat, potentially being moved. this past summer, and at every turn, Dukes would stop us and say, I think the real key is the summer of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if, to your point, Phil, if they determine this is not going to work, like it doesn't work in its current construction, perhaps cat pout some more, that would be the upcoming off season. Then is the crucial time to like not only make the decision but move on it,
or the deadline. You know, you could.
Right.
There's all now the Knicks steam is back for like the 10th time in the last 2 years.
Gerson, yeah, Gerson,
our buddy,
yeah,
friend of the show.
Gerson
I love it. Every 6 weeks, a new Knicks rumor pops up, and everyone's like, "Oh, the Knicks are interested in Towns." Like, it's like the worst kept secret in the NBA.
And then you know what happens inevitably? The Nets swoop in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
How often have the Nets? It's like Durant might go and become a Knick, and it's like, yeah, the Knicks will be back.
Yeah.
Here come the Nets.
Yeah. I mean, it deserves to play out for another 2 or 3 months, and then if they got to a point where they're just kind of toiling and the trade deadline's coming up, you can absolutely move Karl if you need to for probably a decent haul. I don't know if you're going to get the haul that you gave up for Gobert back, but they've got options going forward here at the deadline and next summer if it doesn't work. But if it does work, this team could be big and very dangerous in the Western Conference. So that's a wrap on Flagrant Howls here, your favorite Timberwolves lifestyle podcast. Do you have one more thing there, Judd?
Yeah, I just want to, on Gobert, where do you think he is at as far as now being a year in to his tenure here, being more comfortable? It did feel like there was and I'm not shocked by this. It felt like there was a prolonged period of season last year where he just didn't really look comfortable yet. Do you think that he's worked through that entire thing? Because, you know, the trade's never probably going to be a good trade, or it's not, but
yeah.
I certainly think there could be more comfort from him than what we saw for an extended period of last season.
I don't know how I can answer that question without watching him play a game, you know? Like I'm not trying to be flippant. I don't know if he's comfortable because we haven't seen him play a regular season game.
Thought your spies might have told you some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, everyone's optimistic. Everyone that I talk to is like, it's like the best version of everyone, right? Everything's great. Everything. I will tell you that Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert were sitting next to each other for 2.5 hours on the bench last night, so those guys are fine. They're not punching each other.
Couple shots of the arm, you know. Hey, buddy, you know. Boom.
Yeah,
right in the nose.
They seem to be fine and friendly, and everything's great. And
that's the least of my concerns. In fact, you know what? Sometimes that's positive. It's out there.
Yeah, I think it was positive.
It's more the sniping. It's more the sniping behind the scenes that drives me nuts.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like, it's hard to say anything until you watch these guys play in the regular season, because there's some of the questions that existed a year ago still exist today, unfortunately, and we just have to see what happens when they play the Raptors and get into their early season schedule. So, and we'll be here, Flagrant Howls.
Good stuff.
We appreciate you guys making this part of your regular rotation of podcasts here. Please give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple Podcasts. We can help grow this community of Timberwolves fans, long-suffering Timberwolves fans. Judd's going to be at the arena on a regular basis. I'm going to be at the arena on a regular basis. And we'll see you, I think, at least one more time this week, but for sure twice a week and more next week as the season starts here. Flagrant Howls. See you guys.